been asked a lot over the last few days. What does the SEC do now? What do Greg Sankey, what is the SEC, what do they do now in response to this? Have you thought about that much lately? What do you think?
Well, it's sort of like we've been talking about with Notre Dame, right? We got to see what their decision is. Until Notre Dame moves, well, let me once again. Until Notre Dame moves, and that would be a very strange move. But until Notre Dame moves, nothing's going to happen because that's the chess piece that everybody's going to wait to see what's going on there. Once Notre Dame moves, and I don't think Notre Dame is coming to the SEC. I think the SEC would be wise to go after them. I think that the SEC would take them if they wanted to come. But I think that Notre Dame, geographically and historically, it just makes sense for them to go to the Big Ten. Once that happens, the SEC will probably swoop and try to break up the ACC. They'll probably go for North Carolina, Clemson, Miami, and Florida State. Get the big dogs out of that conference and go ahead and crush that. And that puts the SEC at 20 when that happens. At that point, with the Big Ten, where do they go? I mean, there's nothing left in the ACC they would want. Maybe Virginia Tech, maybe Virginia, I don't know. But at that point, the Big Ten has to start. That's the first time where they really have to start thinking, like, where do we want to go? Do we want to go down to the Big 12 and try to pick off Oklahoma State and things like that? Do we want to go get Oregon and Washington at that point, or I don't know. But the SEC is probably just going to sort of sit there and watch because the thing is, the SEC, even if the Big Ten adds Notre Dame, the SEC is still in a position of strength. They have 16 teams. They have 6 of the top 10 at worst brands in college football playing in their conference. They're in great shape. So I wouldn't be too terribly worried about it if I were them.
Yeah, I think I've changed my answer on this a few times too, but the last couple of days when talking about this, my answer has been nothing for now. I don't think the SEC is doing anything for now. Now, these things change rather quickly. I mean, we're not even a year removed from when Ross Bjork had to get on an airplane to fight like hell for the Texas Aggies to keep Texas out of the SEC, and we saw how much that worked. I mean, that's not even a year ago when that happened. So this can change rather quickly. I could change my mind on this, but when you ask, what does the SEC do now? My answer is nothing. They don't do anything right now. Because why do they have to? Where is the pressure on the SEC to respond to the Big Ten? What pressure is there? The Big Ten added a couple of teams that I don't believe were on the SEC's radar. I'm sure that they would have happily welcomed USC if they would have tried to apply, but I don't think that was a thing that they talked about. The Big Ten just evened membership numbers with the SEC, and these two additions don't cause the league to pass the SEC, right? I don't think the Big Ten has passed it. Now, it's bolstered. It's strong, very strong. But I don't think it's, well, we got to respond or else we're going to get left behind. I don't think that's the thing here.
Yeah.
You can be pragmatic.
The top dogs are all that matter. So for the SEC, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Florida, Oklahoma, Texas, those are the top dogs. That 6 is better than the Big Ten's top 6, even with Notre Dame. Because what is it? Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, USC, then who? Who is it? Michigan State, Wisconsin? Great programs, winning programs. Wisconsin, fine. Wisconsin versus, I mean, who's 6 in that group for the SEC? LSU?
Florida?
Come on.
Recent national championship winning Florida?
Yeah, I mean, Florida.
Semi-recent.
I'm trying to think, who would be the Wisconsin equivalent? Arkansas?
Arkansas. But Wisconsin's been better than Arkansas.
But in terms of they're a single state university, there's no real competition for them in the state.
Yeah.
But it's not the biggest state in the world. They're not a program that recruits in its own state to get players for the most part.
They can't.
That's where they are. Well, Arkansas is what? At best, seventh. That's an absolute best. I don't think they're a better program, top to bottom, in terms of athletics than Auburn and Tennessee. So, but that's the Big Ten's sixth best.
Yeah,
I mean, really, Penn State, not better than Florida and LSU.
And there's no added value with them. I know this is all football, but Penn State, there's no added value with Penn State. Like North Carolina, basketball is a huge added value. Because when these television networks buy these conferences, it's not just football. That's what they want, but they get all the basketball games. Think about how attractive for ESPN, Disney, or whoever, North Carolina would be to the basketball slate. That's real money. Is it football money? No. But if you're asking why North Carolina over Clemson, Clemson the better football program, for sure. But geographically, they're kind of already in the center of the SEC anyway. I can't help but wonder, and I really made an old friend of mine who's a Clemson fan really mad the other day when he and I were talking about it. When I said, does the SEC need Clemson? If Clemson calls the SEC and says, we want in, I don't think the answer is, oh, yeah, come on in. I think the SEC is going to kind of wait a little bit. They're not just because they could have added Clemson a couple years ago if they really wanted to. There's a little secret that people in my home state, former home state, really don't like to hear. They've been trying to get out for a while, and they can't. But I think the added value of North Carolina, to me, is what puts them ahead of, say, a Clemson or a Miami. New state, new market, all that, whatever. Not the best football program in the ACC, but they're competitive. Their brand holds. And I think the added value with basketball does mean something, because that's 40 games or whatever that you air every year that people in all 50 states want to watch because it's North Carolina.
Right.
And I think that does matter.
Yeah, basketball, it's not a huge piece of the puzzle, but it is a piece.
Yeah.
And if you can add value through basketball, they're going to take it. Especially the SEC, which has been trying for the past decade to become more and more relevant in basketball. And you've seen all these different coaching hires and teams putting money into facilities. Teams like Ole Miss and Auburn, historically not great basketball programs. For Auburn, it's paid off tremendously. They have one of the better programs in the country right now. So if you can add some value to your brand with basketball, that's certainly a plus for your resume if you're trying to change conferences.
So, long story short, for those reasons, I don't think the SEC's rushing to move. Now, if Notre Dame, for example, were to join the Big Ten and the Big Ten were to go after North Carolina, maybe you see a faster response. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see any more movement for a year, at least in this conference, the one that we talk about every day. There may not be any movement because the ACC's got to figure out how to get out of that TV deal. That's the next layer to this is, just go get North Carolina. Well, North Carolina either has to pay a boatload of money that they may not have to get out of a 14-year deal, or they've got to get 7 other teams in their conference to agree to blow up the deal and leave the league. I don't think 7 other ACC programs would have a home if they were to do that. I don't think they would. So it's a mess right now, and I don't think you're going to see any finality for 12, 24 months. It might be a while. Because what's the rush?
I don't think we'll be sitting at media days this year with any kind of breaking news happening while we're in the middle of interviews.
No. Although the Greg Sankey conversation is going to be fascinating now. His press conference.
Want to get him on the record. When we'll have a sit down with him like we do every year. Want him to say it out loud. Mississippi State and Ole Miss aren't going anywhere, and maybe that'll settle some people's nerves.
That's got to be the first question.
Yeah.
Even in the big hall, just can you confidently say today that all 14 members of the SEC today will remain that in perpetuity?